Yo, it's Jared. I'm on leechess.org, and I would like to show you a game that I played from the Tuggeranong Vikings Chess Club Championships 2017 tournament. This was played on the 10th of April 2017. This was round 4. I was on board 4. The time control was 90 minutes per side with a 30-second bonus per move. And I had the white pieces. My rating was 1742. And my opponent is Jozo Rosic with the black pieces, and his rating is 1328. So I kicked off with e4, and my opponent answered e5, knight f3, knight c6, and I played the Italian game with bishop to c4. White, of course, has many options. Bishop to b5 is a move, d4 is a move, knight c3. There's all sorts of moves that white can play. But I went for bishop to c4, and my opponent played bishop to e7. More common is the move bishop to c5. You can also play the move knight to f6. Those are the two most popular moves in this position. Bishop to e7 is fine though. This is known as the Hungarian defense. And I played d4. My opponent captured on d4, and now I played a gambit. I played c3. It's more common to just recapture on d4. Knight takes d4. And then we'll get some type of position like this, where white is slightly better because he has more space in the center. Black has less room to move his pieces, but black has no weaknesses, so should be okay. Instead, I played c3, and this is going for a gambit. Of course, I was hoping my opponent would take this pawn, and then I'll play this move to attack his pawn on f7. And it looks like white is just winning here, but this is actually not the case. Black can play the move knight to h6 to guard the pawn on f7. This looks risky because, well, white can just take this knight, and what's the point? Black can't take back because of queen takes pawn mate. But black has this nice move, short castles, and the point is I can't save my bishop because black also has ideas of c2 and pawn takes b2, which wins my rook in the corner. So the main move is bishop takes pawn, king takes, and then knight c3. And yeah, white has his pawn back, black's king is a bit weakened, and white has all of his pieces out, and black still has a couple of pieces here at home which he needs to get out. White is a little bit better. It's not a massive edge, but white's a little bit better. So this is the type of position that I was going for when I played pawn to c3. My opponent played a move that I did not know at all, and it's actually the move that the engine likes a lot, knight to a5. And I spent about half an hour at this moment calculating what happens after the move bishop takes pawn on f7, because oftentimes this is an idea that white can play if black is playing this type of maneuver, just moving the same pieces a bunch of times. Unfortunately for me, this sacrifice isn't working. Bishop takes f7, black can just take with the king, and my intention was to answer with knight e5, but after king f8, it's clear that white just has nothing. I was looking at this move, but black simply just has knight f6 and I have nothing. I'm just a piece down and just losing here. I was also looking at queen to h5 with the idea of checkmate, but after g6 I can take here with check. And okay, if he takes the knight, then I take the rook. So I actually wonder, is that so clear? My intention was, the line that I had calculated during the game was actually to take the knight over here, but taking the rook is, maybe actually not completely clear. Probably black's better anyway. I mean, white doesn't have any pieces out, so I don't know, maybe this is good for black. But the engine, of course, mentions that this line is just not working at all for white, so there must be some sort of resource that black has in that position. So I didn't see anything in that position that was working, so I decided to just play the move bishop to d3. And now I was quite certain if he's not taking the pawn on c3 now, then white's just better, because white's going to take the pawn on d4 and he'll have 2 pawns in the center, and black will have a really bad knight on a5, and he'll need to take some more time to get that piece back into the game. And my opponent did not take on c3, which is best. He played knight to f6, and I recaptured my pawn. So now I was reasonably happy here. I have these 2 fantastic pawns in the center of the board. Black's knight is offside. Black doesn't have any room to move his pieces. You know, he can't really get his pieces out. It's kind of difficult to say what he should play in this position. He castled, and I castled, and he played d5. This is probably correct. Black needs to fight back in the center in some way. I don't want to take the pawn because that leaves me with a weak d pawn, so I pushed. And now knight to e4. And I actually wasn't feeling so happy with my play at this moment. I played knight c3 after some thought, and I thought that he should play f5. The computer actually doesn't want to play f5. It actually wants to play the move that he played in the game, which is knight takes c3. And I thought, well, this is just really good for white. I have this massive wall of pawns, and white's just looking great. The fact that the pawn is on e5 means that there's no knight on f6, which means that black's king side is a bit tender. Somewhere down the line, white can think about moves like knight g5 and queen h5 and really just attack black on the king side. Or even, if I undo this paint, you could play a move like h3, knight h2 and f4 and just push everything home and just try to run black off the board with your pawns. That's not such a bad idea. So I was feeling rather good at this point in the game. Black played c5. I was a bit surprised by this move. It seems kind of logical, but I'm not quite sure it's the best move. I played h3, and I was actually quite sure that he'll play the move that he played now. This next move he played is not good, but it's the type of move that he likes to play. He played c4. And the reason I say this is not good is now black does not have any pawn play in the center of the board. His options are now lessened because he doesn't have this pawn play. So I just moved the bishop back, bishop c2. And he played b5. This was his idea. He wants to move the knight back, play a5, b4, and try to get some play on the queen side. I played the move. He might be intending to play pawn to b4 right now, so I played bishop to d2. This is not only preventing pawn to b4, but it also has a slightly sneaky idea in mind, which my opponent didn't seem to notice. So if you'd like to pause the video, try to work out what is the purpose of bishop to d2. What is white's next move if black does nothing? Alright, I'll just put the first move that he played on the board. He played knight c6, and he didn't see my idea. So pause the video and see if you can find the best move for white. Okay, the move that I played was queen to b1, which attacks the b5 pawn and attacks the h7 pawn. So black will lose a pawn now, and this is not good for black. Of course, he wanted to get his knight back to c6 because his knight on a5 is misplaced. The engine points out the move rook to b8 because it sees that white wants to move the queen to b1, and so now after this move, black can play a move like h6, and all is fine. But after queen to b1, he's now losing a pawn. He played rook b8, I took on h7, and I just came back. And without much thought, he played the move a5. He wants to keep going with his own pawn play on this side of the board, but I don't know, this might even be the losing move. If you'd like to pause the video once again, try and find out what do you think is the best move for white. Okay, the best move for white is the move that I played. I played queen back to d1. And the purpose is I move the queen off of the b file. So I don't have any tactics to worry about with black playing b4 and opening up the file for his rook. And I also have the idea of knight to g5 or possibly knight to h2 with the idea of queen h5 check, which would be lethal. So my opponent, I was expecting b4. I mean, he can't really, I don't really think there's much that he can do about this idea of knight g5 or knight h2. So I was thinking b4 and just hope that he has some type of attack on that side of the board. But he made my idea work even more. He played bishop to e6, and now I just played knight g5. And black's in big trouble here. The engine actually wants to play the move knight to h2 and says that this is even better. Also with the intention of queen h5 and also to run the f-pawn. This might be better, but the lines that the engine gives are rather complicated, and I personally think that the way that I played is easier to play, even if it's not technically better than what the engine is saying. So I played knight g5, and he basically has to take this knight. But in the game he played g6, which is much worse. Taking the knight, this is the line that I had calculated, queen h5. Of course he can't move the king because this is mate in 1. So his next move is forced, bishop h6. Bishop takes h6, and he can't take the bishop because of mate in 2. Just show that very quickly, it's basically the same thing. So he needs to play this move g6. But after bishop g6, f g6, queen g6, I have this mate threat, so he needs to play, and I'm also on his rook, so he needs to play rook g8, and then I take this bishop. And I basically thought, alright, this is just an easy win. White is up 3 pawns right now, and black's king is just very weak. The engine pointed out to me a rather nice move, which I hadn't seen. Knight takes d4, and the purpose is the knight gets out of the way of this rook, which comes onto b6. So after pawn takes knight, rook b6, and black will win back his piece. So with this sequence of moves, black has won a pawn back. But after the move, just rook a to e1, I mean, it's reasonably easy to see that black is just lost. White's next moves are just going to be pawn to f4, and you know, it's just over. The engine, after some thought, wants to play the move queen to f8, which is basically just saying that black's happy to lose. I mean, this move is not one that you would want to play when you're down 2 pawns, so not a good position for black, but that's what he should have gone for. Just to back up, the engine actually, rather than playing bishop takes g6, wants to play back to f3, which also makes a lot of sense because I keep this attack open on his rook, so this is also just rather good for white. But as mentioned, he didn't take my knight, he played g6, and the end is near. I just played knight takes e6, and I took this pawn. So now, once again, I want to play the h5 check, and he will resign. So he played king g7. I play queen g4, with all sorts of ideas of moving the bishop. Of course, my main idea is to play bishop to e8, and then pick up the knight on c6. So he played rook f7. And once again, if you'd like to pause the video, try and find the best move for white. There's multiple moves that win, of course, but what's the best move? Okay, the best move is bishop to h6 check, which is a move that I played. So after king takes h6, which was not played, white has a forced mate with queen h5, king g7, queen h7, and mate. And the engine gives the best move as king h8, which of course just loses a whole rook. So that's also quite good for white. And so he played king g8. I took the rook with check, king takes, and I played queen h5 check, and in this position my opponent resigned. These two pieces keep the black king in this corner of the board and forces the move king to g8, queen g6, and checkmate. So I hope you enjoyed that game. If you have any questions or comments about this game, please let me know in the chat, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Thanks.